Yo, what's up everybody, it's Tuna. Today's video I wanted to showcase the build that I've been playing. It's the Gemma 3 Flame Pleasure Firebird Flame Path build. So this build was actually made by Shady Broker, so definitely big shout out to Shady Broker. He is, a theory crafter as well as somebody who's pretty prevalent in the Torchlight community and makes also very cool builds. But essentially, this is my take on it and basically what I've done with it so far in the season. And I think the build is so good that I really just wanted to showcase to you guys because it's been a lot of fun and it has everything that I like about a build in Torchlight Infinite. And the most important thing about it is that it's reclined. You don't have to do any kind of crazy weird sort of ramping up or like weird type of stuff like that in order to get to where your damage needs to be. All you do is you right click and the build deals damage. Now the first thing you actually want to do when you play this build is you want to go over to settings, battle, and you scroll down and you click auto channel. And what that does is that makes it so your flame path is now a toggle. So whenever you're flame pathing, it just automatically toggles, right? So you don't have to hold right click. So your character kind of just like runs on his own. Now everything else can pretty much be automated, but the one thing I don't like automating is blurry steps. However, you can also put that on automation. All you'll have to do is you'll have to buy a preparation of a cooldown of 4 seconds in order to get that automated. So if you wanted to do that, you do have spare energy in order to do that. All you have to do is go on the trade auction house here and buy a preparation, which, they cost quite a decent amount. Last I checked, they were about like 500 FE, but that's totally up to you. Now, when you click that, it's going to make your character run pretty fast, and that's really nice. And then there are other things, of course, that are going to make us run even faster once we do beacons and stuff like that. But just to give you guys a DPS test, currently my gear is not optimized in the slightest. Actually, there is a lot that I can still improve, but just yesterday I think I hit about 1.3 trillion or something like that, but we'll see it here ramp up. Yeah, about like 1.3 trillion 1.3 T, which takes a little bit to get to, like a little bit of ramping up, because it's of course it's a damage over time build. But damage over time builds in this game are pretty crazy in that they don't feel like damage over time builds because of the way Reap functions. So Reap is a really nice mechanic that we're making use of. We're getting it on a bunch of places, but Reap essentially what it does is it looks at how much damage you would deal in a certain period of time, and it deals that damage in a big chunk. But they have cooldowns, right? And these cooldowns are independent of each other, so that means that you can have them on different pieces of gear, and they all sort of like have their own internal cooldown. So yeah, I have one on belt, which this belt is not by any means done. It's one of my next projects that I wanted to undergo. And then you have it on ring as well. You can have it on weapons too. You can have it on gloves. So those are the main places. However, the second ring, I actually just went for a crafted one so that we could accommodate for a additional curse on that, because yeah, elemental destruction is a pretty strong curse. So getting it on there is worth more than having another reap from Traceless Pain. But if you really wanted to min-max, you could probably grab a Traceless Pain and put Elemental Destruction on it. But that'd be pretty expensive. But either way, let me just explain the mechanics a little bit before I go deep into the gear, because the mechanics itself are a little bit weird in that, like, all you need to do is you need to understand how Firebird functions, and then from there you can kind of just, put the pieces together. But yeah, Firebird is a necklace, and this necklace creates this kind of like effect where when you break a barrier, your barrier bursts, and when it bursts, it looks at how much current energy shield your character has, and it adds that percentage amount as base fire ignite damage. So it deals 80% of current max life and 100% of max energy shield to nearby enemies. That means that scaling your barrier actually does not do anything, but scaling your energy shield does. So actually it's one of the few builds in the game where currently scaling defenses has there's two axes of scaling for defenses. Both you're getting tankier and you're also dealing a ton of damage. And as you can see here, I have 11,000 energy shield, and yeah, I can get a lot more if I was to min-max further, but you can get some pretty crazy numbers of energy shield. So yeah, the more energy shield we have, the more damage we deal. Now we have additional defensive mechanics on this build too. We can reduce a lot of the elemental damage we take. We have auras too to help us with that, and also to help us with our elemental resistances, as resistances are actually quite hard to deal with recently. But also blur, and blur is pretty insane. It's a mechanic that basically makes you avoid damage. So on top of the fact that we are having a massive ES pool as well as damage reduction, we have blur on top of that, meaning that we have like a lot of room for kind of recouping the damage that we take. And then we're going to be using Force Start as well. And Force Start is going to be automated with a activation medium energy shield, which you can buy at like 70% or so. And these are actually quite cheap if you buy at 70%, meaning that when you do take damage and you start taking damage, your HP will just automatically shoot back up, and then will not stop regenerating during that time. But on top of that, we are also having a bunch of armor and all that kind of stuff to further reduce the damage we take, and we can also reduce the damage with slates and that sort of stuff. But those are sort of like the defensive layers. How do we actually burst the barrier? This is like the most important mechanic with Firebird, because if you're actually unable to burst the barrier, a Firebird, or gain barrier in the first place, then you will not deal any damage whatsoever. Now, first of all, how do we gain barrier? Gaining barrier is done through one of three ways. You can gain barrier through a helmet mod that gives you a percentage chance to gain barrier, which is this modifier right here, 23 to 45% chance to gain a barrier when taking damage. The downside of this is that you need a requirement of level 100. And the only way that you can get a level 100 Sun's Embrace is if it drops as a priceless legendary. Priceless legendaries this season are very, very expensive, and I don't actually recommend that you go this way, because self-farming as well as potentially purchasing it can be very expensive. And in actually the end game, I think it's more beneficial to look to corrode these helmets with with them not being priceless, and get like maybe an additional stack of ignite or something like that. So yeah, I think self-farming this helmet by running the lava zone boss is going to be the way to go, and then corroding them in mass. As you see, this is basically what I've been doing. However, I haven't really managed to hit a good corrosion yet. I've hit like every single corrosion in the game, but not the one that I want, so that's a bit of a shame. But yeah, corroding is really good, because that means that now you basically have a 50-50 chance to hit what you want, but then you also have a 50-50 chance for that to be actually a +1 to ignite or not. So yeah, that is one way to get barrier. Now the second way to get barrier is going to be through the Slate kinetic conversion. As you can see here, kinetic conversion makes you take 20% less damage while moving, which is going to be all the time for this build, and it's going to give you a 100% chance to get a barrier for every 5 meters of movement, meaning that you'll basically always have a barrier up all the time, and then as long as you keep moving, that's going to be totally fine. So that is a great way to get barrier. However, the downside of this is that you are going to be losing Starfire, which is the passive that I've been using, right? So Starfire, I think, is going to give you a lot of damage here, because it gives you both 30% ignite duration as well as +1 max ignite. Depending on how many current ignites you have, that is like a huge multiplier to how much damage you're going to be dealing, because it just means that you can stack more ignites, because in this game, you are limited by how many stacks of ignites you can apply to an enemy, but thanks to the helmet as well as Starfire, we're able to increase that by multitudes of 3. So yeah, that's really nice, getting Stealthfire on there. But the third way to get the barrier, which is the way that I've been doing it, is to use a candle, and the candle that you are looking for is going to be Shrink Back. It says 50% chance to gain a barrier when taking damage. And we have to actually trigger this self-damage loop one way or another anyways, because we have to damage ourselves in order to lose the barrier to then proc the Firebird. But yeah, we're using Shrink Back to do that, and the downside of that is that you're getting 10% less all elemental resistances, which honestly kind of sucks, but you're going to be able to recoup that through your suffixes over time. And even if your resistances are not capped to begin with, the build still feels much tankier than any other build that I've played. So yeah, it's really nice. So you get Shrink Back on there, and you won't have any issues with your resistance. And for the second candle, it doesn't really matter. I just went for a movement speed as well as AoE and damage while clearing, because that just feels really, really good. But alternatively, there are other candles that you can get for damage. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, to make it more consistent as well, you can additionally put guard on your flame path, because it's going to make it so that every time the supported skill is used, you gain a barrier if there's no barrier, right? So as you're moving, every 5 times the skill is used, you're going to be gaining a barrier, meaning that every time you get a channel stack, you're basically going to be getting a barrier stack there, and that's going to make it a little bit more consistent. Between the candle and having guard on your flame path, you're not going to have any issues generating barrier at all. Now, the next thing that is really important, and it's the most important thing to be able to trigger this sort of explosion loop, that you're getting through Firebird is going to be with a Slate. So the Slate is another mandatory piece for the build, and that is going to be a God of War Slate, which is this right here. 30% chance to gain 1 stack of any blessing when you trigger a skill. Now, since your amulet is actually a trigger skill, that's really nice because you're going to be getting a bunch of blessings that way, and meaning you're going to get tenacity blessings for a little bit of damage reduction and that sort of stuff, but that's the upside. However, the downside is it takes 10 secondary physical damage when casting a skill. And every time you get a channel stack, that counts as casting a skill. And essentially what happens then is that you're going to be taking physical damage as you're casting, and you're going to be breaking your barrier. That's going to start off this loop. So yeah, getting the barrier generation through the candle, the Slate, or the helmet, as well as the God of War Divinity Slate that makes you take 10 physical damage every time you cast a skill. That is how you're going to be proccing your amulet, and that is how you start dealing a damage on this build. Now, that is the most important mechanic of the build and how to get it to function. But I'll talk through some of the gear as well. So we're using a Sun's Embrace because this is the only way that we're actually able to increase ignite limit currently on the build. There used to be an affix on helmets that they have removed, but Sun's Embrace is going to be giving you +2 ignite limit. Now you can imagine that if you're starting with an ignite limit of 1 and you're adding 2 on top of that, that's basically just like 200% more damage there. So that's absolutely insane. So from there on, every ignite, you have diminishing returns how many ignites you get, but additional ignites is going to be the biggest multiplier for this build. And then on top of that, it also gives you inflicts 2 additional stacks of ignite, because you actually need to be able to inflict additional ignites to get those ignites stacks to stack. So if you have an ignite limit of 2, but you can only inflict 1 ignite at a time, you're still going to be igniting only 1 ignite stack. So you need to have, you need to balance the number of how many ignite stacks you have with how many ignite limits you have. So for example, in my case, I have 1 base ignite, and I can inflict 1 ignite because of that. And then I have 2 ignite from my helmet, but the helmet is going to be giving me 2 additional stacks of ignite. But then I also have the Slate that gives me +1. So that means that I am going to be having to get another Slate that gives me a, which you can see right here. This will move out of the way. Inflicts 1 additional ignite. So that means that I can actually inflict all of the maximum ignites that I have. So that's something that you're going to have to be balancing yourself. So for example, if your helmet has, inflicts 1 additional ignite instead of 2, that means that you're going to have to be getting 2 Slates that give you +1 ignite. So yeah, make sure that you have, you can inflict the amount of ignites that you have in your limit in order to deal the maximum amount of damage. Now looking at the rest of the gear, of course, you're going to be going for a Firebird, and on every one of these pieces where you can, you want to be getting energy shield as well as resistances until you have both cap resistances and a very high sum of energy shield. That's very important. And this one you can actually farm by running God of Machines, which is what I did. I just ran God of Machines for a few hours, and they're very common actually, but make sure that you are on the intermediate filter, not the advanced one, because if you are on the advanced filter, you will not be seeing 2-star legendary aptitude legendaries. So make sure that you are on the intermediate loot filter when you are doing this farm, and you're going to be getting the Necklace of Firebird pretty consistently if you do God of Machines. So just run a bunch of maps in T7, speed farm until you see your God of Machines, and then grab your amulet and craft whatever you want on it. Now you see, like, mine is nothing like crazy about it, just T2 elemental resistance, but T1 max energy shield. So yeah, that's honestly like very good enough for me. And you can always corrode it because there's actually like 0 downside to corroding this. Now for the belt, and as I said earlier, this is something that I still wanted to upgrade. So I wanted to upgrade Reap to T1, and I wanted to potentially like re-roll out, get it to T0 and remove elemental resistance and that kind of stuff. But here, the belt, the Eternal Sea Fog, is just insane because it gives you so much movement speed. And this movement speed is very, very important in my opinion in order for me to enjoy the game. Now you can get a belt that gives you a ton of energy shield and that kind of stuff instead, but I really like the Eternal Sea Fog as it makes my character, move a lot faster, and it makes me enjoy the game more because of that. And you can have, like, because of the new crafting system, you can get like Reap on there, you can get flat energy shield as well as resistances as well if you were to craft this properly. And the legendary is actually pretty cheap as well, as you can see. you know, they range from 15 all the way to a few hundreds, depending on what mod they have on there. So yeah, Journal Sea Fog is insane, and I really recommend it. Now, Traceless Pain is absolutely broken. Like this ring is super strong. It is the strongest ring for us by far, especially with the new legendary crafting system, because we can, you know, you get Reap on there, which is unique to this ring, as well as skill effect duration, which is really good for us too. But this is also really good because you can get additional affixes on there. So, for example, Energy Shield, Affliction Effect is going to be one of our biggest multipliers for this build, and you know, it's basically just the more multiplier to get it wherever possible, and then also resistances and that sort of stuff. Now, another thing to keep in mind is that you can actually, so for example, if I was to craft something that's really good here, and I was to find another one that has better stats, or I've corroded better stats on it, you can always use a new system to basically transfer the modifiers that you have crafted on one ring onto another ring. So what I would do is I would put like another ring here, for example. What this means is that it would transfer these stats over to this ring. And you know, I've been just crafting these rings anytime I get a 3 legendary aptitude one, whenever possible, so that I can, you know, get the best sort of corrosion or whatever on it. And it's one of the legendaries that I actually have put here on Legendary Vision, as you can see, Traceless Pain, so that I can drop more and more of them at 3 legendary aptitude and try to keep improving upon what I have, right? So that's going to be the ring slot. Now for the blade, the best modifier that I look for is going to be the additional ailment damage here, and as well as affliction effect. So these are going to be the 2 most important modifiers to get on your weapon. But then you can also get Reap, but Reap on weapons is not actually that insane, as opposed to maybe even just getting like percentage elemental damage or something like that, right? So the most 2 important stats you're going to be looking for are going to be the additional ailment damage as well as affliction effect, and the other stats that you can look for are going to be elemental damage, fire damage, as well as Reap, ailment damage, and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, this is a really good craft, something that I made, but it's kind of like, I was trying to make a second one and it ended up being really bad. Oh yeah, one thing I forgot to mention is that intelligence is actually a crazy stat that you can get on your prefixes now. And it's really good to get as wherever possible, because not only does it also increase your energy shield, but it gives you more damage multiplicative. So it's going to be about 0.5% damage per point of intelligence, meaning that you have 20 intelligence, it's going to be 20% additional damage, which is just absolutely insane. So getting it wherever possible. For example, I put it on my boots, and actually it's better to not put it on there, but I would put it on my gloves as well. So I would put like percentage gear on that, as well as intelligence. Like I also put it on here as well. But you can see that my second weapon is like very bad, and I still was able to hit 1.3 trillion. So yeah, this one is gonna have additional damage, intelligence, thought damage, ailment damage, and I could put like if I had like a high tier affliction effect, as well as elemental damage or anything like that, then it would be much better. And for the body armor, actually the body armor, you do not need 2 additional curses, you only need 1 additional curse, because getting 2 additional curses is very hard on this build. Now I'll explain that a little later, but yeah, you only need 1 additional curse, and then from there, what you want to do is you want to be getting as much energy shield as possible. So ideally, you want to start off a base with T0 gear energy shield, or T0 flat energy shield, and just start off of that and roll into aura effect. You know, of course, you have to have your additional curse. So I would definitely look for a base with either T1 ES, T1 flat ES, and T1 additional curse, and roll like that, or just start off of additional curse, roll into T1 ES, and then lock those 2, and then go for aura effect or something like that, right? Now aura effect is like pretty uncommon, but if you roll it at T3 or something like that, you upgrade it to T1. But another thing you could do is just start with additional curse and aura effect, and then roll into ES or something like that as well. So yeah, there are various ways to do it, but ideally what you're looking for is as high energy shield as possible, and additional curse as well as aura effect. And resistance, of course, is a bonus there. It's going to help you to cap your res. Now for your gloves, you're going to look for something actually similar, and with intelligence though. So if you go for like gear energy shield as well as percent energy shield and intelligence on your prefixes, that would be perfect. And then you have Reap. This Reap is like very valuable to have, because it's one of the slots where you can get like really good value out of the Reap, since it doesn't have like aura effect or affliction effect or that kind of stuff. So getting the Reap on the suffix here is going to be very good. And then dual resistances to help you cap your res again. So yeah, that would be like the ideal thing to look for on gloves. For the boots, these boots are actually pretty decent, but they could obviously be improved as well. But yeah, gear, yes, intelligence, or as well, you could get deflection stacks. Deflection stacks is probably a lot better for you than intelligence. It doesn't give you damage, but what it does is it basically gives you like these stacks that when you get hit, you're basically avoiding damage entirely, and then they restack over time. Deflection stacks are gonna make you feel much tankier. But I have to be honest with you guys, like even running like 8-3, 8-4, my character never dies outside of you know, one of the god effects, which is gonna be like the weird manta ray when it does like the ice triangular thing. That one kills me sometimes, but everything else I can basically just face tank and it's totally fine. So yeah, gear, energy shield, as well as aura effect, erosion resistance, and movement speed are going to be the stats that you want on there. This ring is insane. I crafted it yesterday. So for me, the reason why I have +2 curses on here is because I wanted to do dream interpretation and get Scorch on the implicit. But that is not something I recommend you guys do. It's completely just insane how difficult it is to get that affix. So instead, I just went for T0 elemental destruction on here, and I started rolling for other things. Now, I managed to get the dream affix to upgrade my prefixes. So I got T0 ES intelligence, but it downgraded erosion res down to T3, but that's totally fine since my resistances are capped even with that. But the most important thing is to also have affliction effect on here and double resistance so that you can cap your res. And I've already looked through the blades here, so yeah, the second blade is just going to be a little bit bad since I was like looking to craft that next. And that's going to be increasing my damage a lot more. Now, I already talked about the candles a little bit, but I'll talk about the slates. Now, we want to have slates that give us additional ignites as well as additional damage once you use a mobility skill or something like that. But you definitely want to be having at least one of these 0.4% blur effect for every 1% life lost. You're going to be permanently losing life. So yeah, this is a really good affix to have on here, and it's going to give you a ton of blur effect. And blur effect is going to be increasing your survivability as well as speed and all that kind of stuff. It's really nice. And next, you need additional ignites. So that's going to be on God of Might. And as well as I have additional damage for 2 seconds using mobility skills. So this is going to be refreshing itself because every time you get a channel stack, that's going to be like giving you this bonus every time. So this is 100% uptime on 8% additional damage. And then you're going to need a God of War slate here to give you, you know, the self-damage mechanic as well as, you know, potentially some other things here. And yeah, you're going to have to balance out how many additional ignite stacks you have and try to get as much damage on the slates as possible. But the rest of the time, you could just get, you know, more multipliers wherever possible. Now, this slate here is completely wasted, but you kind of want to have one of these slates to inflict the additional ailments because we are using a talent that makes us deal more damage depending on how many ailments we deal. And we are guaranteeing ailments depending on whether we hit with that element. So that means that we need to deal lightning damage and cold damage to shock as well as chill. So you definitely want that here. And we also have on the tree a way for you to wither so that you can get that additional ailment on there and get the effect of that multiplier. One thing that I saw that Silent was using was he was using -5 additional elemental damage taken for every type of elemental damage recently. So that's going to be like pretty good damage reduction as well that you can get on that slate. And now for the big one, of course, you want Starfire, and secondary, you could just basically take whatever you want. But I got Stealth Stab, and it's honestly insane because it makes me take less damage as well as make me do more damage. So this slate is just absolutely insane, but you can go without that and just go for Starfire or for kinetic conversion. So the first talent row we're going to be taking is Goddess of Deception. Goddess of Deception gives us access to Windwalk, which gives us 25 additional dot damage. So for every 2 seconds after dealing dot damage, so that's going to be a permanent 25% additional dot damage there. And then we're going to be taking Subtle Impact, which gives us Blur, gains an additional effect, 25 additional dot damage. And the cool thing about Subtle Impact is that the more Blur effect we have, the more we're getting out of this. So you're going to be increasing the amount of damage that you deal depending on your blur effect, which is why it's important to have more blur effect. So yeah, those two main talents are mandatory. Then we go through here, we grab the damage as well as the skill effect duration. Then we go up for the maximum energy shield nodes as well as charge speed, and then 10% max energy shield gains blur when energy shield starts to charge. So that's really nice. It's going to be giving us max energy shield as well as a little bit of you know, gain blur, whatever, but we don't have any issues with gaining blur, so that's just going to be a 10% max energy shield node. Then we go here for more energy shield. And as I said previously, you definitely want to be speccing into energy shield because energy shield gives you damage, right? As well as defenses. So getting as much of it as possible is going to be good. And then since we need to actually put 24 talents here, this is where we get this minor talent, which gives us 2% will duration as well as adds 8 base will damage. And this is important because it's going to be giving us the additional ailment that to inflict. You know, we need to inflict as many ailments as possible, and wilt is going to be that additional ailment. It's enabled by just having one minor talent there, and that's going to bring us to 24. Now the next one we want to go for is Psychic. Psychic is basically the bread and butter of this build. It's going to be for Affliction. We're going to get 10 base Affliction afflicted per second, as well as 30% additional Affliction effect, meaning that every time you have percent increased Affliction effect on gear or anything like that, that is going to be multiplied by 1.3. So yeah, it's definitely like a crazy multiplier for our build. So we definitely want to get that. And then the second one is going to be Reap Purification, which additionally settles 65% of the remaining total damage when reaping, then removes all damage, all of the target's dot damage. So what happens here is that when you reap, you're going to have to like restack every time. But since we stack really fast, it's not really a problem, right? But yeah, this repurification is basically the entire build. Repurification is completely broken. It's really, really strong. So you definitely want to grab that. For the nodes, we go for some ES there, as well as skill effect duration here as well. Then we skip as many rows as possible to get over to here, cooldown recovery rate, as well as sealed mana. And then we're going to be getting damage against cursed monsters so that we can gain access to paralysis, and paralysis makes monsters take 15%. It's 10% additional damage. So yeah, that's really nice. We're going to be paralyzing monsters to make them take 10% more damage through here, and we're going to be getting increased damage against cursed enemies too, which is not wasted at all. Then we go through here, reaping cooldown recovery speed and more recovery speed. So that's pretty nice because that allows you to essentially reduce the amount of time it takes for reaps to come back up, and it's going to trigger more often, meaning that reap purification is also going to trigger more often. And then we get another reap here, so that's 0.1 seconds of reap every 1.5 seconds, reduced by the cooldown recovery speed. So cooldown recovery speed of reap is a massive more multiplier that you can also get on rings. So if you actually do get that, it might actually be worth to look into instead of affliction effect. Now we have curse effect here, so you get curse effect as well as more curse effect, but then 6% additional damage against cursed enemies. It's good since we're using 2 curses. That's going to be a little bit of a damage increase. However, you can also go for the ailment duration instead, but I tried the 2 with just 2 curses, and it ended up being better since we are using 2 curses, elemental destruction as well as entangled pain. Yeah, the additional curse effect as well as the additional damage ends up being pretty much a net positive for us. Now warlock is the final one we're going to be using. We want to be using indifferent for additional cooldown recovery speed. This is going to be increasing basically all of our CDR that we have on our gear as well as the tree by 35. So again, it's going to be a 1.3 multiplier to all the cooldown that we have. And then the final one is Dirty Tricks, which guarantees to inflict all ailment types on hit. And then upon inflicting damage, 6% additional damage for each different ailment type the enemy has. And it's a multiplier, right? So that means that like it multiplies by 1.06, and then it multiplies that by 1.06 again, and then multiplies that by 1.06. So yeah, it's really, really insane, and it's the reason why we want to have wilt, shock, ignite, chill, and everything possible. So yeah, inflicting ailments is going to be as good as possible. So we have ignite, we have frostbite, we have freeze, shock. Well, so getting that as much as possible is good. Then we have ES here, so that's a bunch of ES, skill effect duration, sealed mana, more mana. Then we have here a chance to cause ailments, but it's mostly for the ailment duration, because the longer the ignites last, the better. And then we have here energy shield again, a bunch of energy shield. And then we go here for movement speed while blur is active. More movement speed while blur is active for more movement speed, of course. Damage, adds base ailment damage upon inflicting damage, 12% damage for every type of ailment the enemy has, which is nice. It's synergistic with Dirty Tricks. Some elemental resistance, and then here ailment damage ignores resistance. Now you can actually in ultra endgame, if you go super min max on this build, you can benefit from having penetration, as you will be able to take the enemies into negative resistances. But I have found that especially like in mid game until ultra min maxed, it is better just to grab this talent here, since it's just going to be giving you it's just going to make you ignore all enemy resistances, and enemies do tend to have a lot of resistance, especially with some of the chiseled mods that you put on maps. So when you're using Netherrealm Resonance, you're going to be getting a bunch of resistances on monsters there. So just having that be ignored for one talent point is just really insane. So yeah, this is really, really good to have. It's like super good value as opposed to getting a bunch of penetration. For hero memories and hero traits as well as relics, you're going to want to grab a Breath of Exchange. The rolls on this don't matter, and these are actually quite expensive, though make sure that when you're searching for them, you're clicking for 3 engram. As you can see, they're about like 240 FE or so, but they're pretty worth it, and much cheaper than the alternative of a, a rare hero relic, and it's going to give you a lot of damage too. So definitely one of the good ones to have. But the most important ones are going to be Thorny Paradises, as this will give you an insane amount of base damage. And Thorny Paradises are, they have a roll of either 1 or 2%. 1% is the better roll, and it's what you want, and 1% are actually going to be pretty expensive. So if I was to go here and look for 1%, you can see that the base minimum is 333 FE for 1, and you're going to want 3 of them, right? But you can start, of course, with 2%, and 2% are 40 FE each. So yeah, you by no means need to go for like the bisque here to begin with, but if you do actually want to do 8-4, then of course things are going to be kind of expensive. Yeah, getting 3 of the 1% ones is going to be something that you'll want to go for. One of the upgrades that you'll look to do, as early as possible, as it's quite easy. For the traits themselves, of course, you go for Sinful. Groaning Echo is the second one. Now I was testing like both of these, and they're pretty similar, so you can just play around with them a little bit. Burning Depths, and then Flame of Desire here, 100%, as well as a Dress Liquor here at the end. It's a bit of a weird name, but yeah. And that's basically what you're going to be doing for hero traits, and yeah. But you can definitely play around with Scorching Lashes or Groaning Echoes. It's not one that I actually found too many differences with myself. And that pretty much sums up everything there is to know about this build. We can look at some of the talents as well. I will share the build code with you guys so that you guys can just have like a quick access to the build, and that's going to be in the description. So yeah, you can definitely check out my build at this stage. So we're going to be getting Path of Flame here, linked to Reaping Agony, Quick Mobility, Guard, as well as Cataclysm. You have Entangled Pain, Terrain of Malice, Preparation in order to automate that, and Abysmal Hatred. Then we have Force Start with Activation Medium Energy Shield, and you can go as low as 65% or something like that, but it doesn't really matter. So I went for 74, so it starts to trigger earlier. Uplifting, Defensive Layer, and Iron Fortification. Blurry Steps. This can be changed for a blink if you like it, but I just prefer to run fast. Blurry Steps, Well Fought Battle, Mania, and Mass Effect. You can always change for an activation medium here instead of Well Fought Battle. So activation medium preparation at 4 seconds is going to ensure that you have this up all 100% of the time with our cooldown recovery, as well as duration. So then you have Starstalker with Plane Amplification, Mania, Overclock, and Preparation. Then you go Deep Pain, Selfishness, or Amplification stand as 1. Precise Charge Flames with Aura Amplification, Selfishness stand as 1. Elemental Resistance, you can get precise auras here if you want to. I still hadn't bought them because just spending my money here and there. But yeah, Elemental Resistance with Seal Conversion, Selfishness, and Aura Amplification. And then Energy Fortress, Selfishness, Aura Amplification, and stand as 1. Now, if you are lacking Elemental Resistances, you can actually swap in stand as 1 into here, Elemental Resistance, instead of Energy Fortress or Deep Pain or something like that, so that you get additional aura effect for your elemental resistance to get your elemental resistances up. So I think now I think now we're actually done with the build guide and everything that you need to know about it. So yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys have found this helpful. I want to finally give like a little word thank you to Secret Trader that has put together a document documenting basically all of his progression through the build, as well as some early examples of how you can level the build and all that sort of stuff. So I will link this in the description as well, so that for you guys who want to have a more like a written type of guide rather than a video, you can go here and check him out. He is, you know, putting a lot of work into documenting all of his item progression, his trees, and that kind of stuff. And I did take a lot of examples from this document too. So big shout out to Secret Trader, and of course, big shout out to Shady Broker as well. They are both great. So yeah, thanks guys for watching. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys again soon. And I hope you're enjoying the Torchlight Infinite Season 2. 07.